Hello again and welcome back to the Nordic Pavilion and to our daily brief. We have this very unique opportunity actually here at the Nordic Pavilion to talk to the heads of delegation of the Nordic delegations, and today I am joined here by Mattias Frumeri from the Swedish delegation. You are head of the Swedish delegation, and we also have, I think, an audience both today with us, both from Helsinki and from Stockholm. We can see Stockholm on the screen now, and on the other screen we have Max Bonnier Eklund joining us from Helsinki. But I will start here in Glasgow by asking you, Mattias, how is it going?
It's intense. We're really getting to hopefully sort of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's quite intense right now with a number of various negotiating tracks still open. We're getting new iterations of text, so we're analyzing those and then coming back into meetings to see how parties are sort of reflections on those texts. And also for the discussions on the so-called cover decision, which will sort of be the framing of the COP as a whole. We've been having a couple of consultations at head of delegations level for those, and we'll be having, I think, yet another sometime during the course of tomorrow. So it's many tracks ongoing at the same time.
Okay, you said iteration of texts, but what are the texts about? I understand that transport was supposed to be on the agenda today, or is that just something I heard?
No, it's true. It is. I'm not sure if it's today or tomorrow that it's Transport Day, but those are sort of the theme days which the COP presidency has announced for the entire 2 weeks. So we had finance and energy last week, we had the youth on Friday, I think, and we had adaptation and resilience on Monday. So those tracks, those theme days are not specifically related to the negotiations itself. So the texts that we're working on are more focused on sort of delivering the rule book, it's on finance and adaptation, and then of course again on the sort of the overarching cover decision, as we call it, about, and there we would want to see sort of the process forward on retaining ambition and keeping up ambition.
Okay, and how hopeful are you now when it comes to what you want to see there?
I will remain hopeful throughout the week, and then I'll be judged after that to see how right I was, or how right it was to be hopeful, but I want to be hopeful.
What would you say about the Nordics and you as a group there with the other delegations? How do you stand out as being more hopeful and more pushing, or?
Well, I think we as Nordic countries jointly have sort of I mean, there might be nuances, but we have a message of the opportunities in climate action, and bringing the kind of experience that we have from our own societies and the kind of transformation that we're going through. So I think that's a message which all Nordic countries are sort of sending to colleagues across the world, that the transformation is happening now. There are opportunities in the transformation. That's what we want to share with colleagues here at COP, and of course outside the UNFCCC process as well. But then also sort of from a purely negotiation perspective, I mean, we have a couple of Nordic countries being part of the European Union and others outside, so that also sort of gives us different perspectives in the negotiations.
Do you feel that you are being heard by other countries and other delegations?
Yes.
Yes.
Then of course, I mean, everyone needs to be heard and should be heard in the process, and not only the countries, but also the non-state actors, I mean, have an important role to make. So we have to ensure that all these different voices are heard throughout the negotiations as well.
Now I'm going to turn to you in Helsinki, Max. You are a key listener here. You've been following the discussions. You have a question for Mattias, I think.
Hello.
No, we can't hear you.
Do you hear me now?
For the best. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see if we can get some
Let's
sound
try again, Max.
Yes. Do you hear me now in Glasgow?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. So, Mary and Mattias, I would like to ask, are we having any progress within the most important questions in the negotiations? Do we see that we will get those $100 billion a year after this COP, or will we have to wait up until 2023 before this will actually turn out? And also, I have a question about the Article 6.
Oh, now we lost you, Max, but we have one question already about
Maybe
the $100 million. But now you can, now I think you're back with us. The Article 6. Article 6.
Perfect. Do we see any progress within the Article 6? I heard last week that the Brazilian delegates were up to make a compromise, but is that actually the case, Matthias?
Okay, so we have two questions there. First, the $100 billion, and then Article 6.
I think my assessment is that we're seeing progress on all fronts. It might not be as substantial and quick progress as we would want to see, but there is progress on all fronts. And since we're all working, Article 6 and transparency, experts are continuing to work on the text and to make sure that we have something to deliver. So there is progress. On the 100 billion, the donors presented what we call then the delivery plan just a couple of days, I think, ahead of COP. So that was sort of the input, as it were, to the COP itself and the discussions on finance we have. So the delivery plan itself won't be up for revision now at the COP, but rather what we might see as a result coming out to the COP would be, some kind of indication of how the goal is then how we are ensuring to deliver on the goal. So that's maybe what we can be expecting in terms of outcome. And maybe sort of a recognition of the delivery plan itself, and that donors now have sort of set out a timeline of when the goal will be accomplished.
How hopeful are you when it comes to this? Because this is like already quite an old promise, and there hasn't been delivery on it. So do you think that now will be the time when the rich countries start delivering?
I think so, and I think also that we made this commitment to the 100 billion, and we should have delivered already in 2020. So the delivery plan is part of that process to ensure that we now do deliver. And I do take the point that that there can be views saying that, well, you haven't delivered already. Why should we trust you now? And of course, we can only give our word that we will be delivering. But I think, at least from the Swedish and EU side, we're keen to ensure that we do deliver on the commitment to the 100 billion, and also show sort of to continue that. That solidarity with developing countries to ensure that we're supporting them in their transformation towards climate neutrality as well. And again, coming in and highlighting the opportunities that we see. Of course, and that looks different from every country's perspective, but at least that's sort of the kind of approach which we will want to see.
How much of a discussion how high up on the agenda, let's put it that way, is this on the discussions you have at the moment? If you look at these discussions from the point of view of the developing countries, this must be a really, really big issue.
I would say it is on the top of the agenda, together with, when we talk about ambition, increasing ambition in terms of NDCs, cutting emissions faster. We want to have high ambition when it comes to adaptation. We want to have high ambition when it comes to finance. So that's part, as I would see it, of a adaptation or ambition package, as it were, both on mitigation, adaptation, and on finance. And then, other issues high on the agenda, of course, the rule book, with the three main components of the rule book, which we're looking into with Article 6, transparency, and the common frameworks.
We have an audience here also in Glasgow, and I wanted to know whether somebody has a question here, because we have a microphone for you. There you go. Okay, we have many microphones here. Let's see.
Anthony Lane, I'm a journalist at IHS Markit. With respect to Article 6, is it correct that the issues surrounding share of proceeds from the trading of voluntary carbon credits hasn't been resolved, and what would a compromise on this issue look like, in your opinion? Thank you.
Well, I wouldn't want to go into potential compromises at this stage, since we're sort of in the midst of doing the actual negotiations. But no, it's still very much an issue which needs to be resolved when it comes to the share of proceeds. And again, here from a Swedish perspective, I mean, we keep on, we highlight the kind of efforts which we're doing to support developing countries in adaptation. So I think we were the first country with a multi-annual finance pledge to the Adaptation Fund and the Least Developed Countries Fund, a 4-year annual pledge to supporting the Adaptation Fund. So we're encouraging other donors to come forward and making those kind of commitments as well, which would then provide that kind of predictability in adaptation finance, which we understand that many developing countries are looking for.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Because now is your opportunity to ask and get some insight into what is going on in the negotiation rooms at the moment. No? I'm just checking, and I'm looking at Max there in Helsinki, and if nothing happens there, I'm going to ask actually, a couple of days ago, Matthias, when you were here at the Nordic Pavilion, we also had some youth delegates with us. And Max, I can see you will get another opportunity. We had some youth delegates with us, and they were talking about youth washing. And you then said that you will do all you can to get the young voices really heard, also in what's being said at the negotiation tables. How's that going at the moment?
Well, I mean, we're hoping and we're trying to ensure that we will provide that kind of platform. And again, I mean, within the Swedish delegation, we have 2 youth delegates who are also liaising them with other youth delegates here in Glasgow, and also not being able to be present, those not being present here. So I mean, we meet daily. I mean, they're part of various negotiating tracks as well. So sort of an integral part of the delegation. So hopefully that helps us also being aware of the voices from the youth movement within the Swedish delegation. But I think also what we would hope to see is that approach being reflected in the outcomes of the COP itself. That, you know, the importance of both recognizing youth voices and also sort of making sure that we provide those kind of platforms.
Yeah, and that is the same wish that we have heard from all our youth delegates here, actually. Max, do you have a question? I could see
Yes.
you looking as though you would have a question, so please go on.
Yes, so one of the most pressing issues here with climate change is the use of fossil fuels. And my question is just like, why don't we see more of a discussion around the end of fossil fuel subsidies? Subsidize fossil fuels with 10 million Swedish crowns every minute. Why aren't we doing anything about this? And why isn't this a bigger part of the COP?
Well, that is a very relevant question.
Indeed. Well, just firstly, maybe just to highlight that there are various initiatives globally where we are sort of pushing to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. I mean, we, from the Swedish side, were part of one initiative called the Friends of Fossil Fuel Subsidy Reform.
Yes.
Where we're working together with partners then to be phasing out fossil fuel subsidies, for example. There are also other initiatives, for example, linked to carbon pricing, where we have the Coalition of Finance Ministers, which Finland is chairing together with Indonesia, and where Sweden has been leading on work to compare notes on carbon pricing. So I would say there are a couple of initiatives where countries are working together to highlight these issues and highlight the importance of both introducing carbon pricing and also phasing out fossil fuels. That might not be as evident within the UNFCCC process itself, because obviously this is a platform where all parties, all countries need to agree on the kind of measures that we take. And as we all would be aware, there are countries within the process, as there are countries in the world who have maybe another approach to sort of the timeline for phasing out fossil fuels. So maybe not now, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep highlighting the importance of these issues sometime there might be also part of the UNFCCC process itself.
One could say here that fossil fuels is one thing, but the subsidies for fossil fuels is another thing. So at least trying to diminish a little bit the subsidies would be already a great step.
And I think also you can make this comparison with 100 billion. I mean, I haven't checked the figures, but I've heard that we have the 100 billion, but at the same time we have 600 billion in fossil fuel subsidies globally. So these, if you compare those two, I mean, I think that's worth making that point also as an argument to, if we want the 100 billion to be efficiently used, well, maybe we should also be phasing out fossil fuel subsidies.
Exactly. Yes, we have two questions actually here, and now we need to put on these.
Thank you. My name is Anna Garn, and I coordinate the Nordic Climate and Air Pollution Group. Actually, it's first a short comment to Max, and then a question for Matthias. Just to follow up, that for those who are interested in fossil fuel subsidy reform, there will be an event here on Thursday on fossil fuel subsidy reform and swaps of subsidies. So if one is interested, here's the place. And then maybe a leading question then to Matthias. How do you see that we can use the Nordic cooperation, since we're here in a Nordic setting, to enhance the ambitions and the work that you are doing here, since the Nordic countries are not, I mean, we have 3 Nordic countries being part of the EU and the 2 other countries, Norway and Iceland, in other groups. So what's the use of the Nordics here, and how can you use them in your work?
I think the events like these provides this kind of platform to be able to discuss these issues. And I mean, the event you mentioned on Thursday, I mean, maybe you should have one carbon pricing event and one fossil fuel subsidy reform event every day, to make sure that you sort of consistently
stays on the agenda.
Exactly. And making that known and creating that kind of buzz around those kind of issues. I mean, obviously, just looking around here, there are so many pavilions, there are so many activities going on. But I mean, that kind of consistent messaging, I think, from the Nordics could be useful in this context to highlight that we have been able to sort of provide and grow our welfare state whilst not having these kind of other types of economic incentives, which then would be leading in the wrong direction.
Then we have one more question from the audience here in Glasgow, please. Also say your name.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Tine Svendsen, and I'm a part of the Nordic Youth Delegate on Biodiversity from the Nordic Council. And I was just curious to hear how the biodiversity crisis is addressed in the negotiations. Last year, we remember that it was said that it wasn't a topic, or it wasn't addressed, and the interlinkages between the two crises. So how is it this year?
Well, I think the sort of the bureaucratic answer might be that we have a separate process for the CBD, which, as you know, met just a couple of weeks ago, and we'll meet again next year. But I think from a more sort of overarching perspective, I mean, we're definitely trying to see how we can make these linkages between climate, biodiversity, and sort of also, especially now in the recovery efforts, I mean, also linking that to health, gender equality, and youth issues, to ensure that we're supporting countries and ourselves in bringing about that kind of coherent policy which addresses the various issues which we feel are important to address. And then, of course, there's also the more sort of substantial links between climate and biodiversity, how climate action can support protection of biodiversity and vice versa. So absolutely, I mean, it might not be an issue coming out of the COP itself, but definitely something which we're working on sort of within our policy development from the Swedish side, and also, for example, within our development cooperation, trying to support countries to make those linkages as well.
Thank you for that. Max, you have one last possibility if you have one more question, because then we must let Matthias go and have his lunch.
Don't really have a last question. Sorry.
Okay, you don't need to have one. I have one last question, which is, for the following days, what are you expecting to rise up on the agenda, or do you know already what will be on the agenda? how well prepared are you for these different days?
Hopefully, very well prepared. We've had 2 years to prepare, so hopefully very well prepared. But I think what we'll be focusing on the coming days is, on the one hand, what we call then the cover decision, the framing of the COP itself, and how we relate to the science and the fact that we, in our NDCs, haven't been ambitious enough so far. So how do we chart a path forward in ensuring that we can deliver higher ambition? And of course, in the rule book itself, that we're finalizing the 3 elements of the rule book, as well as adaptation and climate finance. So that needs to come together as a package, and I think that's what we're working on in the various negotiating rooms, and there'll be some very late nights in the days to come.
I'm sorry to hear that. I am a little bit trying to understand now what I should think about the fact that we can see Stockholm very clearly on stage. Is it so that you would like to have a question? I hope that we technically can handle this. Try. And please tell us your name, because I haven't got that on my papers. We can't hear you. I was a little bit afraid of that. Try again. No, I'm sorry, we can't hear you. We weren't prepared for a question from Stockholm. We were just prepared to have you listening to us during this event. So next time, I'm so sorry. Thank you, bye-bye. Okay, and with that, I'm going to say thank you for this time. I hope to see you again, and enjoy your lunch.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.